Howdy everybody, Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist from the North Carolina Zoo. It's a little bit rainy and overcast today, even a little chilly, so we won't be outside for too terribly long. I'll invite you inside and let you see a little bit about what goes on inside those barns that the carpenter bees were chewing up. First, let me mention a little bit about plastic. I've said it before, there are lots of different uses of plastic, and quite often the uses determine how good or bad they can be in the environment. The ones we like are the ones that are very durable. They have long use periods and they last for a very long time. The ones we're not quite as fond of, the ones that aren't necessarily the most positive, are the single-use plastics, the ones that are used very, very briefly and then discarded. Those would be things like straws, and also things like many of the shopping bags. Shopping bags are estimated to have a useful life of about 20 minutes before they're discarded, and then they become litter in the environment. Anytime we can give something a little second crack at life, a useful life, that's really good. Like our planter here. You remember a couple of weeks ago we actually took this sandbox, a little tight sandbox that was being discarded by a neighbor, and converted it into what I hope is going to be a pollinator garden. You'll notice we have a lot of our plants growing now. The term I used at the time was incorrect. I said emerge, and we're actually looking at blooming. The first set of seeds had a 42-day period before they started to bloom. The second set had a 70-day period before they started to bloom. These have got about another 2 weeks or so before we start to see the first buds and blooms on anything. But we have a lot of different things that are growing in here. Again, this is one of those great ideas where we took something, plastic, that was about to be discarded and gave it a second crack or an additional crack at a useful life. Come on inside and I'll show you another way that we can actually do that. And we're going to make a tool that we'll use a little bit later on. Okay? Come on, stick with me. Well, welcome inside. I wish it was more luxurious, but this is actually one of my 2 barns, and they're designed to be utilitarian, and that's exactly what they do. I have a couple of workspaces here, and I'll show you a couple of things. First of all, I mentioned that anytime we can give plastics a second crack at life before they get discarded, sometimes that means upscaling like we did with the turtle planter, and sometimes it means just getting creative and doing other things. One of the things I often like to do is I make a tool called Minnow Trap. Minnow traps are useful when we're taking a look at animals that are living in the water. I'll explain in a second. A lot of times when I do what I call creek studies or pond studies, we'll get into the pond or the creek with a dip net. Sometimes that works great, sometimes not so great. The reasons why it can have limitations is in streams, quite often the water is very shallow and there are a lot of rocks. And so these things tend to snag. The critters that you're after can find places to escape. First problem. Second problem is often that can harm the animals. These are soft and sometimes you'll get a leg caught up in here. If you don't know how to handle the animals properly, sometimes you can be rough with them and sometimes that can hurt them. And that's not what we want to do. The whole object of doing a study like that is to get a look at who lives in the water and look at them up close before we release them back into the water. So another way to capture those animals sometimes is using a thing we call a minnow trap. And these are all some that I made here in the beautiful barn right here in my backyard. This one uses a vinegar jug, and the main body of it is a vinegar jug. I like these because you have the handle for attaching a rope that you can reach and retrieve. The end of it here, this is an old food storage bowl that was left aside with no purpose in life once the lid evaporated or broke or disappeared or something. And you'll notice that there's a hole in the bottom here, and I'll explain what that's for in a second. All of this green stuff around here that's holding the 2 pieces of this together, it was the tail end of a roll of weed whacker line I had lying around and didn't have enough to wrap on a spool, so I just used it for something like this. Again, just kind of a novel idea. Getting creative. So this one is a much smaller one, and this is a miniature version of what we're actually going to be fabricating today. Here's how it works. You have this outer container, and you notice this one has holes that, in this case, they're burned in it. And I will be using some things today that if you're very young, you may need some adults to help you out with that. And if you don't have things, there are other ways of doing these as well. I'll just show you this is one way of doing it. These are two bottles, two 1-liter soda bottles that I fished out of the recycle bin. You want to make sure you keep the lid on one, and I'll explain why that is in a second one. The one on the inside, you take the lid off. And basically you need the top of one, and that's in here, and then the main part of the body of the other one. So you cut the bottom off of one, you cut the top off another. You'll see how that works in just a second. These have holes in them because you want water to get in here. Sometimes if these stay in the water too long, and especially in the sunshine, they'll warm up, and anything that's caught inside here, the water loses its oxygen quickly. They don't do very well. And frogs, amphibians, tadpoles, things like that need that. What happens is I'll set these in the water, open up the end, put a few rocks in there for weight, and often I'll take a dog treat. I like to I like to use pepperoni, and I'll just throw one in here, and that becomes bait. So especially crawdads, they're pretty good at eating whatever's in the water. They'll come in here. They'll get to where they can smell it through the holes. They might even see it, and they'll try and find a way to get to it. They'll go around until they get to this end. They'll go inside here, go through this hole, but once they get inside, they can't get out because of the way the funnel is shaped. So the only way they can get out is when I come along and I'll take the lid off and pour them into a pickle bucket or some other container just so that we can get a look at them and see what's there. Now this one is really easy to make. Doesn't use any glue or anything like that, and I'll show you how we do this, so follow me. Over here on the bench, I happen to have these two soda bottles. I'm not particularly fond of any flavor of soda or brand. I just needed a couple that were had clear plastic. The clear plastic sometimes does better. I don't know how this one will work. This is translucent. It's sort of clear, but not completely. These are completely clear, so sometimes these can be the better way to go. So I have these two. They're both Dr. Pepper bottles. First thing, we need to get a pair of scissors and just get rid of the label. And the label is just a thin plastic film. So once you make a cut, you can peel this away. And it is glued partly to the bottle. Oh! I'm kind of not the best when it comes to setting things aside here. But taking off the label, and it will leave you a little sticky spot, and that's okay. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to cut one of these here and get the main body of this. And the other one, we just need the top. So I'm going to get these started. Again, careful, things you want to be really careful about. This is just a utility knife. I'm just going to use this to make the first cut. I'm going to stick a hole in there. And I'm going to come down here on the bottom of this one and put a hole in there. Again, if you have some big folks or some people who are more equipped with tools, that's great. I get my scissors in here and just basically make a cut around here. Doesn't have to be super smooth. And this then is the main body of the Minnow Trap. This one, I started up here. Remember, I don't want to keep this lid. I'm going to set this aside. I'll figure out something to use it for at some point. And this one we'll take and just cut the top part out and make the funnel. And that's what this is. So I have my two parts, two funnels, and the way these fit together is one just goes right in here like this. Now, as I mentioned, you don't really need glue to make this work. You just need to set them aside so that they'll become two sort of together funnels. You can see one inside the other, and like that. So the way I stick these together, these soda bottles are made out of recycling resin number 1. This is called peat or polyethylene terephthalate. When you do polyethylene terephthalate, one of the cool things about it, that particular plastic has some neat characteristics, and one of those is it's a polyester. It has a relatively high melting point. That means that when I take something hot and stick it through here, the two pieces will melt together. And that's what we're hoping to do with this one. I have over here a soldering iron that's warming up. Well, you can use a soldering iron, you can use a wood burning pin, whatever you want to. This is an old soldering iron, and I don't mind it getting the melted plastic on it. Okay, so this is hot enough to actually melt through this now. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to demonstrate what I'm doing here, and hopefully we'll get everything melted together, two separate pieces. I'm looking for the seams to make sure I know where everything is. And then we'll go ahead and proceed to get our first couple of spots in here. And you'll just let these kind of melt together a little bit. Come around on the other side. And these are things that are going to go in the water, so it doesn't have to be super duper elegant, super duper pretty. These are things you're going to use, and I'm going to use, and I will show you how we use them in about a week or so. But in the meantime, we just need to make our little minnow trap this way. And again, I'm doing this in real time, so you see it doesn't really take much time at all to do it. Melting that one together. And sticking this through here. You can let these things get as hot as you want to. They will get hot. I will warn you, if you lay your arm on them, they will burn you. I have got scars. So yes, I get it. So again, this kind of comes through here. And it melts everything together. I'll leave that as a spot right there. So this is basically the minnow trap. This is how you get everything started, stuck together. And I just use heat to melt them. Again, coming back around on a couple of these others. So I will finish doing this. We'll pop some air holes in here, and we'll have a trap, ultimately, that looks a lot like this one. And I'll hold this up a little bit closer so you can see this. It's basically a funnel inside a bottle. Holes that glue the whole thing together, air holes in here. We'll put a little weight in this, we'll put a little bait in it, and we'll pop it in a stream. We'll do that probably in a week or so. We'll see what happens with the weather. But in the meantime, guys, thank you very much for inviting me in. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope everybody's staying healthy and safe. For now, we'll bring you some more on the Neighborhood Naturalist. I'm Mr. Bob. Take care, okay? Bye now.